Fire
I do
chief.
not.
So Paul, I connected with Paul through a speaking group, um, Eagle Rise, and he's a retired fire chief in Milwaukee, and
Oh, okay.
he owns Conway Shield.
Oh,
Um,
Conway. Okay.
yeah, are you familiar? He does some. I know they're mainly in the fire department world, but he's
Yeah.
also you will also see him in the he does they got some police stuff.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I don't know him specifically, but I've heard the name.
yeah, neat dude. But tell me, retired from Milwaukee Police Department. Walk me through your career real quick.
Oh, okay. I started in 1995, January 15. I raised my right hand and took the oath. And the I was a little bit older. I was 30 years old compared to my classmates. There was a class of about 43. Usually there was 60, but we only had 43 for that class. And this was the age of actually Bill Clinton helped me out. So if I ever see Bill, I'm gonna have to say thank you because he
I
signed a
hired in
crime
same
bill.
crime bill, the cops grants. Yep,
Yes,
yep.
the reason I got hired is because of that. We had federal money, and we pushed through like 4 academies that year, which is unheard of. Usually it was one a year, and sometimes it wasn't even that much. But we were so low on cops, and crime was just surging through the ceiling. That was during the we called it the crack wars. You know,
Yeah,
it was a city of 600,000 people. You would have well over 1,000 non-fatal shootings and probably about 250. I think we even got close to 300 homicides in a
really.
city that large, and it was in a very concentrated area. It wasn't like all over the city. It was like in a very concentrated area where you're driving around at night and there's nothing but live gunfire. It was quite the thing. But again, I was 30 years old. I got my education from a 4-year college, University of Wisconsin Whitewater, degree in sociology, minor criminal justice, and I did an internship when I was in college with the sheriff's department in Milwaukee. And I'm like, man, this is the coolest stuff ever. I've got to get a job doing this. So that really lit the spark. And like I said, I got on when I was 30. I was a little bit older than everybody else, but I really felt it when we're doing PT.
Yeah.
It's like I could do push-ups and sit-ups and all that other stuff till the cows come home. But on those long ass runs, oh my God, I'm just like, this sucks. But
Dang,
there
what
was
was y'all
one
like?
other
4 miles was our longest. We had a four
oh
miler that we would do on the regular, man, and it was freaking
oh
great. How tall are
the
you?
I'm 5'9".
So listen, I'm 5'7" on my good days. So my little bitty legs is taking.
Yeah.
I'm taking 2 steps for your one, and then
Well,
you
well, yeah. It's like I'm running with these 21-year-old kids,
yep.
and we did a ton of stairs. We would do long, like marches. We'd do stairs, and like you said, I'm 5'9" with shoes on, and I'm just like, I had these guys running around like antelopes, and I'm just sucking wind. But thankfully, there was a couple of other guys that were older than me, so I didn't look so bad. I wasn't always dead last, so I'm like, okay, I'm thankful for that. And after a while, it got a lot better. But it was a paramilitary organization. You
Yeah.
you saluted everything except maybe the fire extinguisher. You did. It was yes sir. Yes ma'am.
Yep.
And I think that's a good thing. And they injected stress into you. If you messed up, there'd be somebody screaming in your ear, or whatever the case may be.
Train,
And
right? You got same like what we trained.
yes,
We trained in a very stressful environment because they were just preparing you for the job. Um,
absolutely. And they want to see how you perform under stress. It makes
yeah,
sense. It's like, okay, it's like there's no timeout or a redo when you're out on the street.
yeah.
Are you
Patrick,
going to fold?
was you single when you started?
No, I was married. I
She
was
married,
married.
so
I got
yeah,
married young. I
yeah.
was like, I was 23, 24 when I got married. And yeah, that's the first wife because when you when you become a cop, they give you your badge, your gun, and a card for a good divorce attorney because the odds are pretty high. Yeah,
Uh,
it's pretty
my
brutal.
my buddy used to say, "Put the house in her name. It's cheaper. It makes the paperwork go easy."
So yeah, that's what happened there. So it was a 6 month academy, but I really started enjoying it because it was Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
You're
You'd stay
married,
late to do
right? Yeah,
PT or whatever.
you're
Yeah.
married. You
And
got it's getting you home at a decent hour, and you're not
yeah, I'm just like, wow, this is really cool. I've never had a job, and I was working since I was 16, that I had 2 days off in a row, that and a weekend. That's unheard of. I was managing restaurants, I was selling cars, I was bartending. All these jobs that non-traditional, that you don't have regular hours, and I'm like, I get health insurance, I get
yeah.
days off. Really? And you pay me if I'm sick? This is unheard of. And I'm like, I thought I died and went to heaven. I'm just like, man, this is awesome. This is the best. And I get to run around after bad guys all night. This is wow. This is
Yeah,
so
job made
cool.
for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated after 6 months. That's what our academy was. Then, a 12-week field training where you're partnered up with a field training officer, an FTO. I did my first 6 weeks on late shift, which was midnight to 8. And then the second 6 weeks was, they called it early power. It was 11 in the morning till 7 p.m.
That's a good shift.
And it actually is.
It
But,
was a good single
you know,
man. It was a good single man
I was
shift.
I was just gonna say, if you enjoy going out for a cocktail after work, 11 to
Yeah,
7 is perfect for you.
yeah,
You know, it like you said, that is more of a single person's shift for sure. And I wound up at District 5. I did not know Milwaukee. I was living in Madison, Wisconsin,
yeah,
and I had no clue. I mean, I knew where it was. I visited, like some stuff before for like festivals or whatever. And I got the address, and I'm like trying to figure out where this place is. And they said, you might want to go check during the day. Don't do it at night. And I'm like, what? All right. So I do. And I'm like, this is a freaking war zone. There's like, gutted out houses, all boarded up. I mean, it literally looked like a war zone. And I'm
yeah,
like, oh, okay. But hindsight, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. Working in one of the most violent neighborhoods in the city, maybe the country, we're always like in the top 10, really prepares you. It's sink or swim.
yeah,
And, it wasn't going out after soccer moms in their minivans for going 2 miles over the speed limit. I mean, every night was a shooting. Every night was like some big high drama, whatever. Every night was a car chase. Every night was a foot chase. So I did my 12 weeks of field training there, and they put me on midnight to 8, the late shift there. I worked there for about 7 years on midnight to 8. Then the chief at the time had this bright idea of transferring everybody.
yes,
Like over 50% of the department got transferred. It was unheard of. So I got transferred to District 3, which was right next door. And it was the same thing. It's the same assignments, the
new
same
faces.
everything. Yeah, just it was just
Why did
I had to check in
Patrick?
somewhere different.
Why did they have a good FTO?
I had great FTOs. My
Yeah,
first FTO was from that neighborhood.
yeah,
He grew up there, and everybody knew him. He's
yeah,
like, "Yo, Reggie, hey Reggie," I was like, But if something went sideways or whatever, he knew all the actors. He knew all the bad guys. He knew all the good guys.
yeah,
Let's just say that.
yeah, yeah.
And
No,
that
yeah, that's yeah,
talk about somebody with street smarts. I mean, this guy, I remember I was on field training with him. It was like my third or fourth day. We get called to a stabbing at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they give a description. It was wherever it happened on North 12th Street, black male, 5'9", wearing a white T-shirt, black jeans, armed with a butcher knife. Okay, what do you think comes running at us as we're
yeah.
heading to the
It's like,
location? And we're like, no way. So we both, he slams on we're driving the wagon. We're in the wagon. He slams on the brakes. I get out. I draw down on the guy with a knife who's literally running at me. Now he's like maybe 20 yards away, and he's just running at me. And I'm like, get on the ground, drop the gun. And it's like his eyes got super huge, and my eyes were probably bigger than his, because I was scared out of my mind. Yeah, I'm like, I'm gonna have to shoot this guy. I'm like, well, that was a quick career.
yeah.
If he takes one more step, I was transition. The
How,
finger
how
was going
many?
to the
Yeah,
trigger.
how many weeks are you in at that
I
point in
don't
time?
think I had a weekend with
Yeah,
him.
that's good. Yeah, 21 feet
Yeah,
rule. They were teaching you out. They teach you guys twenty
yeah.
one feet rule. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
same.
So
Yeah,
I'm just like, holy shit, here we go. And the guy, I think he sensed that I really, really meant it.
Yeah.
So he drops the knife and he gets on the ground, spreads eagle. And, my FTO hooks him up and we take him back. And of course, he's covered in blood. And it's like, okay, it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to figure this one out. So we walk him back to the wagon and, put him in the back. And my FTO looks at me and says, it usually doesn't work this way. Usually they're running the other way, not towards us, but he was in shock. It was a card game gone bad. They're drinking and smoking dope all night. And he was just in shock.
Yeah.
He stabbed his best buddy in the armpit. Bad place to get stabbed. And he's like, go in the ambulance, get a dying declaration. And I'm just like, okay. So I'm in there and I'm like, I think I remember what that is from my academy
Who
days.
killed you, boy? Who killed you,
Yeah,
sir? Who killed you, son?
that's
Whatever,
that's
whatever, whatever words you want to insert there, but who killed you?
yeah, the paramedics are working on him. They had his feet up in the air. They had two IVs going, one in each arm. They're squeezing the bags, and I'm like, okay, I'm not a doctor, but I know this ain't good. And he didn't look too good, And I said, sir, who killed you? Who killed you, sir? And the paramedics are looking at me like, you want to tone that down just a little bit? I'm like, I'm trying to get a dying declaration, but all he could do was gurgle.
Yeah,
So he goes in the trauma room and never been in the trauma room before. And I was amazed by the efficiency and how well they did their jobs. The doctors, the techs, the
yeah,
nurses, amazing. And the guy who's like the head, you have like three or four doctors working on this guy. They each have their own, like job to do. And there's one guy that is like the conductor of the orchestra. He makes sure everything's going on. So I pull him off to the side. I said, is he going to make it? He said, shit. He said, if it was you or I, we'd be dead. This guy will live to 100. I'm like, okay, flatlined. And it was like, oh. So they jump start him 3 times and he dies each time.
yeah,
And then finally, the doctor grabs his scalpel, opens up his chest, spreads out his ribs, and starts doing open heart massage.
yep.
And I'm like, I don't know, 10, 15 feet away. And I'm just watching this going, holy, wow. I went home that night. Well, not night, it was the afternoon. I was working midnight to 8. I didn't get home till like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And my ex-wife, she said, "How was your night?" And I said, "You wouldn't believe the shit that happened to me tonight. This is crazy. I love it. I wouldn't even care if they paid me."
That so I had done EMS work. So
Mm.
I was if we ended up in the ER, I ended up working, right. I ended up just gloving up and going to work because
Oh, okay,
I had worked in our emergency room.
gotcha.
I had worked in our emergency room prior to law enforcement. So in small towns where I was, so everybody knew you, and so you would just jump in, start handing or grabbing whatever, starting out,
Oh,
all the
okay,
things, right. So I could totally
right.
see you, and that's why I was kind of asking because I went to the police academy, like folks like yourself, that were, just like, hey, found this job, seemed like it was going to give me some comfort. I like adventure, married, all stability, worked
Yep.
did their
Pension.
academy, went home
Yep.
every day to wife. And then you had us, who was the young guys, single, all the things that come with that, where we all band together. We end up going partying, after, or we go all hang out and study together after, say, party.
Yep.
We would go study together and have beer or something other. But it would it was always two different sides of the academy. Those of us that was influenced by public safety, or had military, whatever. And then there was a few
Sure.
guys that was like yourself too. To tell you this, I was 98. August of 98 is when I started, but I came in on the cops grant as well.
Oh,
um,
okay.
the largest our class was 35. We had the largest recruit class at 35, and I think we finished with 24.
Oh, wow.
um,
Okay.
we had one washout day one because they didn't think they had to carry a gun. Like that, like they show the trooper coach shooting. I don't know if they did it with you guys, but they show the
uh,
first day of the academy. Show the trooper coach shootings. But if you Google it, folks, it lives. It's one of those. It's very chilling. Police officer shooting where trooper coach gets killed, and that's one of the first
hmm
things they show us on day one. And that person
Okay.
went out on break and didn't come back. Um,
Well, and that's a good thing
it's
because
a
then
good
they
thing.
realize, you know
Absolutely,
what,
yeah.
this job
And
ain't
for
for
me,
me.
yeah,
It's better than going through all the training and
yeah.
then facing something on the street and you're like, I don't know if this is for me or not. I'm
Put
like,
putting yourself, yeah, put
hmm,
your. So you were. Thanks for letting me pause you there for a second to talk about a little bit. But you get moved from your first precinct over to the next door precinct because the chief wanted to move you all to shake it up,
yes,
or yeah, I got you.
yeah. His idea was to get a different experience. I'm like, this is the same exact stuff, just a different zip code. And I'm like, all right, well, whatever.
Is there a business district I can go work for a little while? Or
Yeah,
hey,
no,
you want me to find some?
nothing like that. There is, but I didn't wind up in one. So I wound up in like the second busiest district in the city. And I'm like, all right, well, so be it. Working midnight to 8. And then I promoted to sergeant.
How
And
quick?
then yeah, about 7, 8 years I made sarge.
So for timeline, 95, 7, 8 years, you spend the majority of your time working midnight 12 to 8.
Yeah, it was all midnight to 8. Yeah. And
What
then I
when's your first wife exit?
that happened in 2010.
So life
That all kicked
later,
off.
later, yeah, all
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
later, later. Got it. Okay, all right.
Yes.
I
Yep.
was just wondering the strain that 12 to 8 put on your marriage because
Oh,
you've been coming
it
out of the
doesn't.
academy, you're 8 to 4, and it's like, oh, the God, this police officer stuff's just going to be wonderful. All right, we're going to be together
It
all the time.
it doesn't help. Let's just say
Yeah,
that. But I had the choice after a while of staying on midnight to 8 or working 4 p.m. to midnight.
yeah,
And we started having kids, and anybody who has kids, it's like if 4 p.m. to midnight, you're not going to see them.
yeah.
They're going to be in school during the day, and the only time you're going to, and then there's all the after school activities if they're in sports, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? You're not going to really experience any of that. So I voluntarily stayed midnight to 8, and I got promoted, and I got transferred to a different district that was also busy, and I worked midnight to 8 there. And then eventually I wound up working 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., which I absolutely loved. I thought that was the
That's a
best
good
shift
shift.
ever.
Yeah, that's
Oh
that's
yeah.
that's that's you get if you can be wound down and in bed. What's your commute time to where you're living?
Back then it was 10 minutes.
Right. So listen. So then if you as long as you can cycle your brain down and be asleep by quarter of 4. Back for me back then, 6, 7 hours sleep. So you can almost get your kids back up, get your kids up off school, have some time with them for breakfast. What?
Well,
Um,
what I would do is, you know, I I always worked overtime. It's inevitable when
I
you're
got you.
in a busy district and you're the boss. So you're gonna work OT. So I usually get home around 5, 4:30, 5 o'clock. As long as it was dark out, I could go straight to bed.
Yeah,
you know, maybe chow down some Count Chocula or something like that, and this and head to bed. And my ex would take the kids to school in the morning, and I'd pick them up around 2:30, 3 o'clock. It was perfect. I
yeah.
could wake up at noon, go to the gym, work out. I would have dinner ready by the time she got home from work. I'd cook dinner every night, and I would go off to work at 6:30, quarter to 7. It was beautiful.
Do you have a good fitness routine back then?
Oh yeah, as
That's
soon
good.
I was always a gym rat. I loved the gym,
Yeah,
and working late shift that was hard. Trying to find the right time. Well, do I go right after work? And I had some buddies that were gym rats too, and we would go together. So that was nice. But after a while, you kind of slip a little bit, and your diet is just trash. It's
yeah,
garbage. And you're not sleeping. You're definitely not sleeping all at once. You sleep in chunks. It's like, okay, again, I was able to be with my kids in the evening or the afternoon when I worked midnight to 8. And I also did, like school stuff. I chaperoned a lot of field trips and whatever. I just didn't sleep,
yeah, yeah.
you
Well,
know,
yeah, I've done
but
that.
it was worth it. I got to do stuff that other dads didn't get to do.
Yeah,
So I was really happy about that. And usually I was the only dad. It was a bunch of moms and me. Yeah, so that was fine.
yeah,
And yeah, I when I got switched over to 7 p.m. to 3 a.m., most of my cars weren't taking assignments. We did a lot of specialty stuff. So we had a lot of fun. Oh my gosh, we had like an anti-armed robbery car. I had a tavern car, which was inspecting licensed premises. So if you had a trouble bar where you had a lot of shootings, which we did, you'd go in there and maybe the city wouldn't shut them down because of the shooting, but we could shut them down because they didn't have hot water.
Yeah.
There's fruit flies in their booze. There's no soap at the bar. There's no, I mean, I would just pick them apart. And it's like, you are nothing but trouble. You've been warned. Guess what? You
Yeah.
know, it's like the Untouchables. They brought down Al Capone with tax evasion. I'm going to bring you down with everything I can think of, because the neighbors in your, in this neighborhood hate you. They do not like you. They don't want this bar open. They can't sleep at night. And there's people literally dying in front of your tavern. So guess what? We're going to put you out. So I got to do that kind of stuff, and it
The
was
plain
just a
clothes. People
blast.
wear plain clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It
Yeah.
depended on what we were doing that day. So
So all right.
that
So
gave me a
District 3, you're working District 3. Is this a new assignment, or is this part of your
no.
district?
I
That's
worked District 3 as a cop only for a year. Then
Yep.
I got promoted. Then they sent me to District 2.
Got it.
So I worked midnight to 8 there. Then actually, I'll back up a little bit. I was a part of a task force. It was a violent crime task force for a summer, and that was 7 p.m. till 3 a.m. And what that was, it was 100 cops, 10 sergeants, a lieutenant, and a captain. And we
Wow.
had free reign of the city. And this is when we first started doing like data driven policing, where
Yep.
there's heat maps, and it's like, okay, where was the most violent crime last night? What's the trends? Excuse me.
You're
So
probably
we
you're
would
probably
go.
2002, 2003 at this time.
It was a little bit later. It was like 2007,
Yeah.
2008, 2006. I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark. And the first day, the captain stands up at roll call, and he's like, okay, this is the deal. I have an open checkbook from the chief of police. Everything you're going to do is on overtime. We're going to go out and we're going to scorch the earth. You know, all these neighborhood groups, you go to neighborhood meetings, etc., are sick and tired of the drug dealers, of all the BS they have to put up with. They can't watch TV sitting up. They have to sit on the floor because they're afraid of a round going through their window. Their kids can't go play out in the front yard. We're going to go and we're going to change that. And
Yeah.
it's like, yippee ki here we go. So the I would start at 7 p.m. I would get done the earliest noon the next day.
It's like a cop's dream, right? Especially it's like an
Oh,
active, aggressive
and
street cop. Yeah.
and plus I'm thinking to myself, I could do anything for a summer. It was 4 months. You could work oodles of overtime. And we could just got to do a lot of fun stuff.
Yeah.
It was that was a blast. And
The
that
city
segued to
I did
like
when I
power.
was doing my task force work, the city that was adjacent to us, where we were homed out of, they had a street crimes unit, is what they called it. Similar work,
Yeah.
where they were just tasked to problem areas or problem uh, people, folks that was committing crimes.
Yep.
They were
We went after. Yeah, we went after the worst of the worst.
worst. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is what police work is for. Like that makes it. That's cleaning
Absolutely.
up, right? That's your.
It is.
I tell everybody's like, I was like, I didn't write a lot of tickets. I'm not. I wrote a few. I did some things. All the things, whatever. But putting bad guys in jail was fun.
Well, and
But
I
then
was
also
in.
helping them find their way too, right? I look back on
Oh,
it, I'm
right.
like, that was just helping. Some folks were their situation was so bad that good police interaction, get them into a system or whatever, wasn't necessarily a bad thing. And
Well,
hopefully, some of those folks came out with new perspective and new directions, and
the neighbors loved us.
yeah,
The good people that lived in these neighborhoods absolutely loved us. They were literally cheering us on, like hanging out the windows. When the first day they saw 100 cops get dumped into like a 4 block area. Are you kidding me? I mean, it was something out of a movie. It was hilarious.
I can only
But yeah,
imagine.
I had a blast. Then, I went on to work late power for 4 years. Then I got divorced. So I had to go day shift. So I went day shift at District 6, which was a slower district, but I still got to do some fun stuff. They at first they put me in charge of the schools, which was a nightmare. I had no idea the public schools were as bad as they
Oh
were.
wow,
Oh my
yeah,
god, that was crazy. But eventually, I got put in charge of the special cars. We had a couple of special cars that did robberies, burglaries. They did a bunch of follow up, writing a bunch of search warrants, et cetera, et cetera. So I was put in charge of them. So I was lucky that I got to do that kind of work again. And we did some plain clothes stuff. And yeah, I finished out my career in 2020. My 25 years was up. And I'm like, you know what? I'm popping smoke. I'm done.
Did you have good bosses along the way?
Good and bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I had some great bosses. You know, it's like anything else.
Yep.
You know, you'll have fantastic bosses, and you'll have bosses you're just scratching your head like, how did you become a cop in the
Yeah.
first place?
Yeah. I've had those. Yeah.
Why?
Why'd you get into this? Like,
Yeah,
our job's to go do police work, not sitting here. Like,
yeah,
we're supposed to be out there.
yeah.
It was,
But I was lucky. I will say, as a cop and as a boss, I was on the street for the entire 25 years.
yeah.
So, and that's where I wanted to be.
You remind me of one of my close, good friend of mine that same thing. Like he did a little stint. I was going to ask you about the rotation stuff. This is where well, this will tee us up for that. He
Yeah.
was he's a K9 guy, cop's cop, right? Just I think he probably slept with his radio on just in case somebody needed something, right? And but he had in the city where I was where our task force was homed out of, they would rotate every 3 years. So you could get a little bit of a grace and maybe stretch it out to five, but they
Yeah.
rotated you every 3 years. And so when he had to go pull a rotation through Vice and some other stuff, and it was just a
Mm,
shock to his system. He was like, "I want to just get back to doing what I like to do. I have my life is spent in my uniform." So he was just kind of the same way. You reminded me like of that. It's like I just want to work streets. I want to be around the people. I want to go fight the crime and the bad guys. Right. That's kind of the way
right.
his mentality was.
But I think there's pros and cons to it. I don't know if there's a right answer, because I have a podcast, Cops and Writers, and I talk to cops literally from all over the world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how other departments do things.
Yeah.
And, if you're a boss, you have to spend say like me, I started in patrol, I ended in patrol. If you're a boss, you're going to have to do like 3 years in the detective bureau. And if you want to return back to patrol, you can. Or, if the bureau is a better fit for you, you stay there. You have to spend like 2 years in internal affairs. And it's like, ooh, that's just chilling. Like, I didn't want anything to do with that. But if you have people that have to go to internal affairs that don't want to be lifers up there, I think their hearts are in a better place.
Yeah.
They're not up there to screw cops.
One of my old bosses
They're up
said,
there.
one of my old bosses was a little, because that was his thing. He had worked in the equivalent OPM, OPR of Office of Professional Management or something. He had worked in
Yeah.
kind of an arm of that. And so he came in, he was like, "Hey man, you got to go learn how everybody works." He says, "It ain't
Yep.
about, the job." He goes, "Just go over and figure out what they're looking for and what their mission is and how they operate and the rules that they have." He says, "It just makes you a better cop, better leader because you understand the parameters a little better. You understand hot button issues, right? Things that'll get you in a hook real quick." He always swore it was the best time he ever spent.
You know, it is very fulfilling to do, say somebody pitches a bitch, they make a complaint against a cop, to clear that cop of whatever the wrongdoing they're being accused of. That makes you feel good.
Yeah.
It's because, and the more active the cop you are, the more complaints you're gonna have. People
Yeah.
don't understand it. It's like you see, it's like, well, this police officer has, five whatever allegations of blah blah blah. And I'm like, my first question is, were any of them sustained? Were were they BS? Well, were they? Just because somebody makes a complaint against you doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah.
If you're an active cop or you're the boss of active cops, you make a lot of enemies. A lot of people are very unhappy with you. That's including moms, grandmas, sisters, boyfriends, whoever.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, he did this and he did that. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess we'll have to investigate that. But
You're
99
pre body cams, right? You probably made it almost through your career without a body cam.
almost. We did have body cams my last maybe 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
something like that. And actually, you know what? Here's the thing about body cams. They're good in a way of somebody would come to the front counter and say, you know what? Officer Robertson called me X, Y, and Z at this traffic stop. Oh, really? Outstanding. You want to come back to me? Come back in the office with me. We'll take a look at the tape. Oh. And I said, yeah,
Yeah.
it's all recorded. Oh. And it is against the law for you to make a false complaint against the police. I'm going to show you that form and I'll show you the state statute. So let's go back there. Do you want to go forward? Well, he was rude.
Yeah.
Oh, you just said he said X, Y, and Z. And it's like, then before you know it, oh, F this. And they're running out the door. And I'm like, bye. Don't let the door kick you in the ass on the way out. But transversely, we had a very controversial shooting where there's a foot chase. Cop is chasing a bad guy who has a gun and popped off some rounds. And the bad guy popped off a round at the cop. The cop started shooting, and the bad guy threw the gun down, and the cop kept on shooting.
Mm.
And they slowed the body cam down till, like frame by frame by frame. And I'm like, that's not how he saw
Yeah.
it. He didn't see it in slow motion. He saw it in real time. And
Yeah.
there's this gap between what your finger is doing, what your brain is telling it to do, and what's going on.
And we're talking thousands of a second in the
Mm-hmm.
grand scheme of things. We're able to really slow that down and give the world a perspective of decisions that are taking place in milliseconds.
Yep.
Um,
But yeah, juries, DAs, all that, they shouldn't see any of this in slow motion. They should see it in real time, the way the
yeah,
cop saw it.
there's some folks that's done some simulator training to educate themselves on that shoot don't shoot. Like situational type stuff that police officers. Because listen, police officers are one of those folks that goes in. They go in to grab. They stop to do a business check, and next thing you know, they're in a shootout. They didn't plan
Yeah,
for that, right? They stop to, they go to pull a car over, and the car speeding. And when I give this example all the time, is that police officer doesn't necessarily know that the person under the wheel is packing heat, just killed three people, got a body in the trunk. He's
absolutely.
just trying to
Yep.
write a ticket. He's just trying to be like, hey, you're speeding through my area.
Yep.
So there's some things that there's some. I always kind of go into we always look at the police officer side, but let's look at the other. We never get to look at the other side of how we got to this moment.
Right.
Like my friend Billy, we do a live every other Thursday. He's a public safety director in Franklin, where I grew up at. He's been on the job for 40 years. I don't know his exact time, but he said something. He goes, bad guys can. He said police officers have to get it right every day. Public safety has to get it right every day. Bad guys only got to get it right once.
True.
Um, so like you're judged by that, and the standards that is put in place. But you know, I'm with you on that one. Those are tough when you see those scenarios play out, and you get to be that person. But man, I tell you, it's different. Like it's different when you hear those things going off, and it's different when you're trying to get your breath, when you're breathing through those moments and trying to keep
Oh
your tunnel
yeah.
vision from kicking in, and you're running. Your heart rate's about 150 beats a minute. You're
Oh yeah. There's
taking rounds, and then here you are, and then you're that split second of
yeah.
decision.
You also get auditory exclusion, your
Yeah,
hearing goes, all kinds of crazy stuff happens.
yeah, yeah. That's Did you any good capers? Any good collars? I saw your word. I haven't used the word collar in a long time. I think you put that in the notes to me, and you're something about a good collar, and I was like, oh, that's so good. I haven't heard that in years. We
That's
used
the
to
name
call
of
them.
my newest book.
Yes,
That's the name of
capers.
my newest book.
We used to say we're gonna go collar this caper or something like that. Me and my buddies
Yeah.
would always joke in that term. But any good um, you got any of those stories that you love to tell of impact or um,
It we dealt with so many of them, it just
yeah,
kind of like melded into one. And
police
you know,
officers
it,
life, man.
it just and a lot of time you didn't need, like I said before, you don't need Sherlock Holmes to figure them out. It's somebody that they knew, and they're either they were gone or they were still there. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was telling a story of I forget who I was talking to. It was another copper, and we're talking about a sergeant that we both disliked quite a bit. And we get there's a 911 call, and the dispatcher's telling us, it's like a 12-year-old girl saying that boyfriend has mom pinned down on the bed, and he's got a big gun in her mouth. He says he's going to shoot her. So we're all like, hmm. So of course we're all screaming over to that scene, and this 12-year-old girl is giving the dispatcher the play-by-play. He's doing this. He's got the hammer back now. I was like, oh boy. And the sergeant gets on the air. Is like, wait for the SWAT team. I don't want anybody to make entry until the SWAT team gets there.
Mm.
Well, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. There is no SWAT team. They're
What
all at
year?
home in their tactical
What,
pajamas.
what
Just
year? Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Cleaning my gun when you called.
yeah, exactly.
What did you? What year are you in here, Patrick?
Oh gosh, this is maybe 98, 99, somewhere around there.
Pre or post Columbine?
Oh boy, that's a great question. But
Here's
you're,
why, because we
and
changed.
I
Like
understand where this is going. Yeah,
yeah, we changed. We started doing immediate action, and we changed on those. We used to stop and wait, and we quit doing that because of the
right.
lessons
See,
learned there.
this sergeant worked day shift and early shift. He
Mm,
wasn't used to late shift. And late
yeah.
shift, we call it the tactical enforcement unit. That was our SWAT team. They were full time, but they only worked till like 1 or 2 in the morning, unless there was a call out or a warrant or something like that. And they're not going to be there for half hour, 45 minutes to an hour before you see any of them. So it's like we're not waiting. So after he says that, you know, we're like the third car there. And, by the time we get there, we could see everybody piling out of their squads going to the door. And we go to a different door and you hear like Milwaukee police, boom, knocks the door down. One of the coppers, and you hear boom. Unfortunately, this guy just blew the top of this poor woman's head off.
Mm.
It was a 357 Magnum in her mouth. And so we're like, oh God, that was ugly. So, we got the guy, we got the gun, you know, blah, blah, blah. He dropped it right away. He's like, oh
Poor
shit.
kid. You got
But
this
yeah, this
just
12-year-old has to
12-year-old
witness
kid.
this.
Yeah,
So,
who's
but we're coming out and we're putting up yellow tape. And Sergeant's like, what do you got? And I said, we got a homicide. He says, well, let's not jump the gun on this. I said, her brains are literally splattered all over the wall, sir. Well, blah, blah, blah. I said, we're out. Bye. See ya.
you serious,
If the,
Patrick? Come on,
yeah,
man.
yeah. We're like, no, if that's your attitude, we're gone. Bye. You don't need us.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So we're like, no,
Um,
you're that big of an idiot. I don't want to work with you.
did the how did his career progress, or her, or how
Uh,
did
he
their?
he retired, but nobody liked working with him. I mean, he was universally hated. But oh well,
It's hard to make
that's
like it's being a sergeant for the folks that don't know it, that's listening or watching this after we get done. Being a sergeant, I never got to be a sergeant, but I work. But this role of that sergeant and just decision making is it has to be very, very practical and common sense. It's probably one of the biggest common sense of there's a guy in the house with a gun in a lady's mouth. That's probably a little urgent circumstance, so we probably need to go. We don't have the resources. Boom, right? It's time of day, so it allows us to make a decision that if that had been 3:30 in the evening, during a shift change where there's 200 cops in your city, probably. And you have a SWAT team that's 5 minutes away, that you probably would look at that differently. But man, that seems like you never really want a Monday morning police officers in the
quarterback.
decision.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still though, you're
But
like, come on, man, what we thinking here?
well, I'll tell you about the busiest night I ever had as a boss. So I do roll call and I get a call. Dispatch is like, I hate to do this to you. If they start out with hate to do this to you, it's not good.
Yeah, it's gonna be a
So
long night.
for whatever reason, we usually ran with 3 sergeants on late shift. I was the only one for whatever reason. I don't even remember. I'm like, okay. I say, hey, you know what? We got a DV guy's barricading himself. Blah blah blah. All right. So I send some cops. I said, I'll be there as soon as I can, and I'm just shoving all this stuff away from roll call. It's like, yeah, this could wait later, whatever. So my cops beat me to the scene, and I got a call from one of them on my cell phone. He's like, hey, Sarge, can we kick the door? I'm like, do you need to kick the door? I'm not there yet. It's all about exigency. And I said, the more we wait, the less exigent this is getting. So I said, just kick the door. All right. They kick the door. Nobody's hurt. They arrest dude. No harm, no foul. I'm like, okay, perfect. So While I'm there getting all the information, because now I have to do a report for my cops kicking down a door. I got to take pictures.
Yeah.
I got to notify the landlord, blah, blah, blah. And just do a little report. It's nothing too tough. Hey, we got a dead body, apparent suicide, that was the other side of the district. I'm like, all right. So I'm like, you got it. So I threw my Polaroid. This is a while ago. I threw the
Yeah.
Polaroid to the cop and said, take a bunch of pictures, give them this piece of paper, go forth and be cops. And it was like, okay. So I rushed to the suicide. There's a guy in the kitchen with this big ass knife sticking out of his chest, blood everywhere, wife, little kids, screaming at the top of their lungs. And I'm just like, whew, all right. And nobody speaks English. Like, okay. Thankfully, I had an officer that spoke really good Spanish. And I'm like, yay. So I said, let's get everybody in this other room, please. So he's getting the story from the wife. And I'm looking at her. She's got broken fingernails. She's got a little shiner. And the guy who's dead, he's probably about, I don't know, 6'5", 250 at least. Big dude. And she's maybe 5 foot, 100 pounds.
Yeah.
Just this mousy little thing. And I'm like, so I get him off to the side and I said, this is a homicide, dude. He said, what are you talking about, Sarge?
Yeah.
And he said, he killed himself. I said, first off, not a lot of people stab themselves in the
Yeah.
chest. It
Would
happens, but
you?
not a lot.
Would
Yeah.
you?
And I said, did you look at her? She was doing battle. She was fighting with somebody. She was probably defending herself. And this guy is an asshole who probably whooped her ass on the regular, and she just got sick of it. He said, no, she wouldn't do that. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I call homicide. Detectives come out. Lieutenant comes out. Lieutenant's like, yeah, this is a homicide. I'm like, yeah, no shit. So we're doing our thing. Then a call comes over for a barricaded subject. Guy wants to kill his family. I'm like, so I look at the lieutenant. I'm like, Loot, do you mind if I go take this? He said, yeah, I'd rather you than me. And I'm like, all right. So I scoot.
This guy's not going anywhere. We're
Yeah,
good.
he's going
Yeah.
nowhere. I
He's
mean,
going nowhere.
technically, yes, I should be there. It's my scene, but
Yep.
it was a small little apartment, real easy to figure out. And it's like, okay, fine. So I screamed down to that. And there were some early shift cars. There were like our anti-gang unit and a couple of late shift cars. The early shift were going in to secure for the night. They were on some like warrant or something. And they're like, hey, do you want our help, Sarge? And I'm like, yes, come on down. So we get there. Sure enough, here's this guy with this huge Rambo knife and a bottle of Jack Daniels. And he's a big biker dude. And his wife and two kids are on the couch just bawling. He says, I'm going to slice them up. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I'm just like, and we had real clear vision going into the house. We could see everything, thankfully. But there was two doors and they were just both barricaded with shit. I mean, furniture. I mean, yeah, you name it, it was in front of these two doors. And I'm just like, okay, well, I guess I will call our TAC unit for this one. This is a barricaded subject that's armed. This is their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the A team cops, let's just say that. I kind of had the JV cops there, for the most part. Not the gang guys, but some of the late shift cops. I get an ambulance to stage like a half a block away. I get all my ducks in a row, and I'm telling the cops, I said, I had a dialogue going with him, and he was just gibberish, just nonsense. And so I'm like, all right. So I told the guys, I said, he takes one more step towards his family, we're gonna have to take him out. And we didn't have patrol rifles back then; it was
Yeah.
shotguns and pistols. And they're like, all right, but we had crossfire wasn't too bad. We had clear visions, clear line of sight, and I'm like, all right, if we have to, we have to. And then he pulls out this bottle of a prescription bottle, and he just dumps it and washes it down with the rest of the bottle of Jack Daniels. And I'm like, oh, perfect.
Tearing me apart.
Yeah. And one of the cops was like, Sarge, he's gonna die. And I'm like, I have an ambulance a half a block
Yeah.
away. I think we're okay. He's like,
Hey, it alleviates a hostage situation. Be patient.
exact. And so he's like, Sarge, we have to go now. And his eyes like roll back in his head, and he starts going through the door. And I'm like, asshole. I'm like, oh God. So we stormed the Bastille, and by the time we got in there and to give him any kind of orders, he was face down, passed out. I'm just like, perfect. Nobody got hurt. Yeah, I have
Okay,
an
it's
ambulance
fine.
a half a block away. They'll scoop him up. He gets to go to jail after he gets his stomach pumped. So I'm like, whew. And then I thought, oh shit, I still have a homicide scene.
Yeah, yeah,
So
okay.
we're all high fiving each other, telling them how what a great job we did. I'm like, oh shoot, time to go. Okay, so I scoot back to that, and mom was already gone. You know, homicide's doing their thing, and he's like, she ain't talking. So she volunteered to go downtown for an interview. And I'm like, perfect. So yeah, I do my thing. I secure for the night. You know, after working a bunch of overtime, I go back to work the next day. I'm in a different homicide, and the same lieutenant's there. He says, "You'll never guess what happened." I'm like, "Oh, tell me, tell me." He said, "We had a great rapport going with her. I had, a Spanish speaking detective. They talked for 5, 6 hours, but she would not give it up." And he said, "We didn't have enough to arrest her, so this detective drove her home, puts a squad in park, and it's like, okay, you could leave, Mrs. Whoever." And she's like, "I did it." Oh, so back to the back to CIB they went, but the DA didn't issue. It's exactly she was protecting herself and the
Yeah,
kids. This
I've
guy
had
was a
those.
total asshole.
Yeah, I had a couple of those. I had a couple of those as well, to where it was very, very obvious.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
very obvious. Did you live where you worked?
yeah. We had residency requirement for my first 20 years. Then after that, they lifted that, and I lived about almost 14 miles outside the city.
Yeah. Did your kids go to school in the district you worked, or just in the city?
No,
Yeah,
I used to threaten them with Milwaukee public schools. I
yeah.
would drive by them and say, "If you don't behave, this is where you're going." Yeah, they went to parochial school.
I
No
guess.
cops sent their kids to the public schools.
Yeah. It's the same. Like, I grew up rural, and the county I worked in is the county I grew up in. So you know everybody, you're
Okay.
friends with everybody. If I had lived there today, my kids would go to school. So you'll hear there's a couple guys that talk about it. And I enjoy talking about it as well, about the pros and cons of policing in the areas that you work in, or that you live in, because you take everything home. So you may go to an accident scene, and it's your student from the school that is in the class with your kid. So that can, not only do you deal with that, you come home and deal with that part of it, and then
Yeah.
your kid is the interaction in the school system and stuff. So there's some folks that's talks about folks in the fire department, folks in law enforcement, that residency requirement, of how positive it can be, because it's regulate, right? It's what you know, and you live amongst, and all those things. But the downsides to just what the extra burden that the family has to carry, just because of the
Yep.
title in their job, right? Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. Did you was that like a big deal for you, or is this did that matter? That probably was a sticking point for you guys. Like, it was just residency requirement. You lived there, and
Yeah. There's certain neighborhoods that were all cops, firefighters, school teachers. Yeah. But I will say a little bit, maybe 3 blocks from my house, right across from a park where my kids used to play, we had a shooting. Two brothers got drunk, they got stupid, they started shooting at each other, and one shot the other guy, and he took off before we got there.
yeah,
And it's a relatively quiet neighborhood, and there was a stray bullet that went through his neighbor's front window, so they were none too pleased. So the next morning, I went and I'm like, you know what? I know he's home. I said, I've got a warrant. I said, which way do you want to do this? We want little Johnny. So, little Johnny was 21, 22 years old.
yeah,
So he came out, we arrested him, blah, blah, blah. But this is 3 blocks away. And then I would see them, later. And I'm like, so that's when I bought my first off duty gun. I'm like, okay, now I'm bumping into people that I've arrested.
yeah. People,
It's not a good
we
feeling.
had take home cars in my uniform days, and you get people knocking on your door.
Oh,
Not a
everybody
bad thing.
knows you're
Like,
a
it's
cop.
just, yeah, everybody knows. Everybody knew, even if
Yep.
you didn't have a take home car. But um, Yeah, it's good. Like it brings safety to that residence or to that neighborhood. It gives that sense of security or what have you. For some they don't like the cops living in their neighborhood. I had someone bragging to one time, or he had said it. He goes, "Be careful what you say around here. A cop lives nearby." And I was like, "You're yeah, you sure will, bud." And so you had that. So there's sometimes there was undue, um, an extra layer that was of accountability, I guess you could say, that was placed in.
Well, yeah, if you didn't shovel your snow or cut your grass in a
Yeah,
timely manner, you would hear about it. It's like, well,
yeah,
he's a cop. What,
he's a
you're
cop.
giving him special treatment or something?
Yeah,
You know, it's like, I just want to live my life, man. Just leave me alone.
yeah. Tell me, when did you get into writing books?
You know, I'm a huge fan of the saying, dig the well before you're thirsty.
Mm,
I knew that after 25 years, to maximize your pension, you pop smoke at 25 years. That's
yeah,
just the way it worked out. And hopefully you live a good long life afterwards. So I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, I love police work, but that's a young guy's game. I'm not young anymore. I don't want to be a cop somewhere else. I had a whole career full of police work and I loved it, but it's time for something else. Now, I sold cars before I became a cop. And when I became a cop, I helped other people buy cars, you know, friends, relatives, whatever. And somebody's like, you should really write a book about this. I'm like, hmm, that's interesting. So I did. It was a glorified PDF under a pen name. You know, I didn't expect to sell anything. But what happened was I started going to writers' conferences. And what happened was you being a cop, you know, the magic happens at these conferences, at the dinners, cocktail
yeah.
hours, you know, when you're just kind of milling about and being sociable. And they always find out you're a cop, always. So I had writers coming up to me and say, "Oh, you're that cop guy, right?" And I'm like, sure, sure I am. Hey, would you need a warrant for this? You know, what would happen if blah, 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 blah. So by now, I wrote a couple of other books that had nothing to do with police work. And they did okay, not great. And somebody that knew a lot more than I did is like, you should write a book for writers about police work. I'm
Ah,
like, hmm,
it's a good niche.
yeah. So I'm like, okay. So I wrote two books. Cops and Writers was first one, Academy to the Streets. Second one is Crime Scenes and Investigations,
Love it.
and specifically for crime writers. So that worked out swimmingly. And then I, to promote the books, I started a podcast.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay. And that was just to promote the books. Well, that grew legs. And now that's doing really well. I've been doing that for about almost 4 years. So that's going really well. I have a Facebook group with 7,500 people in it. And it's
Goodness.
mostly writers that want to know police stuff.
Yeah.
You know, again, you know, do you need a warrant for that? What would happen in this scenario? Yeah, can you get fingerprints off of this? You know, who knows? Some interesting questions. So it all kind of morphed into that. And then I got a 4 book deal for writing crime fiction. I did that. It was called Bruce City Blues. And it's kind of like Hill Street Blues, but set in Milwaukee.
Yep.
And that did well. And then I just released a book on my own called The Good Collar, also set in Milwaukee, where you have a vigilante police chaplain going around righting all the wrongs if somebody slips through the cracks of the criminal justice system.
That's good.
So he, you know, and it starts out with the main character, him and his wife go out to eat. She announces that she's pregnant. They've been trying for a family. Everything is hunky dory. Of course, they get jumped on the way back to their car. She's murdered. He's almost dead. He, you know, he slides down a real slippery path. He's about to get fired, and he does some stupid stuff off duty when he's drunk. It sounds familiar,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And then the police chaplain, and he's this older guy. He was a cop at one time as well, and he's getting ready to leave the department because he's got lung cancer. He didn't tell anybody, but you know he's dying, and he needs an apprentice to do this job that he's been doing. And of course, the only thing on the main character's mind is vengeance for his wife and unborn child.
Yep.
So he kind of makes a deal with the devil or the chaplain to continue his work so he could go after it, and he gets to save his pension.
Oh, that's so cool. I
So
like that.
that's
Sounds good,
that's
buddy.
my latest book.
I'm going to, we're live, so I'll bookmark everything so folks can find that.
Cool.
I'll grab those links and get that updated. We're coming up on an
Thank you.
hour, and I want to make sure I value your time, but I also, I want to tell you, um, I'm working through similar where you're kind of doing yours in fiction. I'm trying to do mine in a comic book form.
Oh, cool.
So I'm trying to, like, my hero is I kind of it's a little bit of me, a little bit of me walking through
Sure.
some of the cool cases and capers, and I've got it in collars for you, Patrick. Cool capers and collars. You got me going back on our sleigh, on our words we used to say. We would be doing get ready to do undercover something or whatever, and my mentor, good buddy, he would always say, "Just remember, Jeff, it's not a collar." He'd be like, we're going to go do undercover." We would joke about it, you know what I mean, or
Sure.
we would have an informant, you know, or somebody just giving us information or in the community, whatever, and we would say stuff like that, be like, "Hey, you got to ride with us. We will take you on this collar," and they'd be like, "Wait, no, no." We just do it for fun. So I've been working on that a little bit. You gave me, man, there's no conversation that doesn't need to be made because you gave me some inspiration just in your work and things that you've done. But
Good.
all me to
I'm
tell
glad.
you this, man, I hope this is only our first conversation of hundreds we get to have, man, because I
Oh,
feel like
absolutely.
feel like you and I could shoot the breeze all day long.
Oh, all day long.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I can't thank you for coming on. This is a Second Chance podcast, and I don't have to introduce you. I don't have to. We don't have to find that story because every in your life in your career, I feel like you found a second chance about every 15 to 30 minutes of your shift.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some
Well,
people talk
it's
about their
funny. I was
second chance at life, and I go, no, man. Police officers sometimes like they go when you're going from hot call to hot call, and it all is washing through. Like you're literally getting a second chance sometimes every hour. It seems like.
I was having lunch with my wife before I hopped on the call, and she said, "You've had 9 lives. You've had more than 9 lives." Because I've had so many close calls. Even when I was like 12, 13 years old, our family got gas with carbon monoxide.
Yeah, didn't even
When
get into
when the
that.
fu-
I saw that. Yeah,
yeah, I've had so many near death experiences. It's so strange, and it's like, okay. And she's like, "Yeah, I hope you haven't used them all up." And I'm like, "I don't think so. Hopefully not."
if you'd like, we're live here, folks. Patrick, how can folks connect with you? Let's leave that for so the folks watching the replay can catch up with you if you need to, and then I'll make sure I bookmark it as well. But how would you like for folks to get in touch with you?
A couple of different ways. I have a website, copsandwriters.com, or you can email me at sarge@copsandwriters.com. Real
Yeah,
easy.
cool. Oh, and I'll bookmark your socials and stuff like that so people can find
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for being with us today and sharing your story, man. Very powerful. The cool. I think you found your sweet spot with your audience and writers and stuff, and then it helps
I
you.
hope
Yeah,
so.
man. I
Yes.
think that's a really cool deal. Just want to thank you again for being with us, and then I look forward to our next conversation, brother.
Thank you so much,
Too cool, man.
Jeff.